Right.
Oh, where did you play? Yeah, Royal. We're talking, oh, I think we can see all that.
And welcome to the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting. It is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. We do have a quorum, and at this time, I would like the opportunity to let you know that we are being hosted here in Ypsilanti at the Riverside Arts Center. Very exciting to be in this beautiful city with the gorgeous sunset over to our right here. And I want to take this opportunity also to thank Deb Holt and Mike Blackston and anyone I may have missed who scouted out opportunities for us to be able to host here in Ypsilanti. So it was a yeoman's job and they did a fine job. So thank you so much, everyone. First on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda at this time? If not, do I have a motion? Cindy, are you making a motion? Okay, seconded by Jesse. All those in favor, raise your hands, say aye.
Aye.
That passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have public comment. And is there anyone who would like to make we have someone, if you could go up to the podium.
Sure.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Hunter, and I am a resident of Ypsi Township. And just wanted to first say hello to you all. It's been a little while, and it's so nice to see so many familiar faces and friends. So I wanted to congratulate you on this amazing accomplishment. This has been something that I, when my time on the board, wanted to see happen. I think this is so important and vital as the ridership area is expansive, and I think our residents, those that we serve, have a right to be close to us. And not all of them can make that happen at 6 o'clock. So sometimes we have to bring that to them. So I applaud you all for making this happen. I would like to see more of this, not just here, but in other areas of the ridership area. So, or service area, excuse me. And this looks awfully thick. So I can't say that I envy your position. I will say that you all have been doing a fabulous job of maintaining the transportation authority. And you all have just been knocking it out of the park. So I'm still around, just right down the street here in the township. You will always have an ally and friend of me. And however we can be supportive to you to make sure we work our best to make that happen. My congratulations and kudos, Jesse. I don't know how far you've been pushing this, but you know I've and thank you to all those that made it a reality. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutcher. Deb, is there anyone online? I don't see anyone else in the gallery here. Yeah.
Jim Mogensen, and you are unmuted.
Welcome, Mr. Mogensen.
Yes, Jim Mogensen from Ann Arbor. So I just wanted to say one thing that I noticed in particularly on the board education packet relating to building ridership is the complexity of transit funding. It tends to be rather technical behind the scenes, but it does influence ridership and other things that are happening. For example, I've been around long enough. I remember when TheRide was started. And I also know that this was actually a federal policy change that made TheRide possible. The idea was that you had these public transit agencies in these capitals, and then you had these public universities who were also publicly funded. And the question is, how can we get them to work together? And the idea was to have money, but to have the money flow through the public transit agencies. So the universities just didn't use the money for their own purposes and not integrate with the public transit agencies. It was very deliberate. There were a number of models. East Lansing has a different model than MSU has a different model than we do. But those were intentional. So when it says that TheRide, it increased ridership because the fares were paid for. And that's why people did that. And most people don't realize where the money comes from. And where the money comes from is a hugely complicated thing to talk about. So I think it's really important, as best we can, to have both the purchase of service agreements available, to have the TheRide University contract available publicly, so you don't have to FOIA all this stuff. And to have that so that we can go through things. I just found out this morning, corporate Greyhound gave me the money. We just bought them a bus. People don't realize that the public buys Greyhound and Indian Trail buses. It's a good program, and I support that. And what the concern is, people don't realize that the public is buying all those buses. So I just wanted to bring that up as you move forward in your conversation about increasing margin. And one last thing, I'm a little concerned. I know it's a term that's used. It went from transit dependent to captive ridership. All of those terms concern me a little bit. Thank you very much for your time and attention, as always.
Thank you. Is there anything else for comment? I have one more. Adam Goodman, and you are unmuted.
Good evening, Adam Goodman. I'm a resident of the city of Ann Arbor, though I will say I think it's fantastic that you all are holding this meeting over in Ypsilanti tonight. I'm also one of the organizers of Trains Not Lanes, which is an organization that has formed to advocate against MDOT's proposed expansion of US 23 and for incorporating transit, pedestrian, and bicycle infrastructure as part of this project. And just to be clear, we use trains in our name mainly because it rhymes, but really we're supportive of any sort of transit scenario here. So as folks probably know, MDOT is leading a US 23 improvement project study for the section of US 23 from I-94 to M14 along the east side of Ann Arbor. Their study is considering 3 capacity expansion alternatives in addition to a straight up reconstruction. These 3 alternatives would look to add either a flex lane, general purpose lane, or HOV lane to US 23. We oppose all 3 of these expansion alternatives. Among many other issues, we believe that they run exactly counter to the transportation and climate action goals that our communities have set. So instead of getting further into the weeds on this, actually, I mostly just want to say a huge thank you to the AAATA and to Mr. Carpenter specifically for getting the word out that you all are willing to work with MDOT to study a transit alternative as part of this study. We and our supporters will absolutely be asking MDOT to take you up on this offer. I'd also encourage everybody listening to visit our website, trainsnotlanes.org, and sign our petition if you agree with anything that I've said tonight. Let's get this done. Again, thank you.
Is there anyone else? No. Wonderful. That will close out our public comment for this part of the section. Now we're on to general announcements. I do not have any. Does anyone else have a general announcement? And if not, we'll ask Mr. Carpenter to make his announcement.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce in person Mr. Jeffrey Pfeiffer. He's joined us as the manager of public affairs and community engagement. PACE is the new acronym for the you would expect the marketing group to have a catchy acronym, right? So Jeff has joined us recently. I think we're on week 5. 7. Wow. And he's already proving his mettle, as some of our public commenters have said. So with that, I think he has introduced himself to you virtually, but I'll let him introduce himself one more time in person.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to meet everyone. I guess I probably want to people to make the last meeting. As Matt said, Jeff Pfeiffer, I'm the manager of public affairs and community engagement here at TheRide. On week 7, I joined TheRide after a roughly 2-year career in Lansing, working on legislative arena mainly on state level issues. I spent some time at the Michigan House of Representatives, and most recently was director of public affairs at a small firm in Lansing, mainly focused on public relations, issue advocacy, grassroots, and stakeholder coalition building. So really enjoying my time thus far with TheRide, and look forward to working with everyone.
Welcome. If there are no other comments, we will move on to the consent agenda. Mike Gallimain sent an email earlier today about a correction that I need to pull out for the board meeting minutes. You have a copy of it at your station. It incorrectly says page 5. It should be page 6 of your packet. And he is asking to have three specific phrases removed from paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Those phrases are shown on your paper right there. Basically, it's the third line to eliminate attachment presented today. Fourth line, eliminate and what was given to the board today. And then finally, in the second paragraph, the third line to remove attachment presented today. Do I have a motion to accept these changes as presented? Motion by Jesse Miller. Any second? Seconded by Rich Chang. All those in favor of amending the board meeting minutes to reflect these changes, please raise your hands and say aye. That passed unanimously. Thank you very much. And then, so with that, the consent agenda will be the amended board meeting minutes and the committee meeting summaries. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendments? First, motion by Kyra, seconded by Chris Allen. And all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Wonderful. That also passed unanimously. Now we are going to move on to our audit presentation. That is headed up by Ms. Dina Reed and our auditing firm UHY. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll just say a few words before I introduce our auditors and hand the presentation over to them. As noted in your packet, the audit report has been completed and it was presented to the audit task force as well as the finance committee in the month of February. It was received well by both committees, and clearly they can speak to that if they'd like at some point. But I would just like to note a couple of positive things about the financial results. We did increase our assets and our net position this year by about $10 million, and we were able to meet our commitment to put more money into the capital reserve to fund capital projects. Our total in our capital reserve this year, at the end of the year, is just over 33 million. So I just wanted to share that with the board and make sure that they had the opportunity to review that. With that, I would like to share that the auditors will give their presentation now and describe the audit and the audit results. So Ilka and Mike from UHY are here tonight, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Dina. So we're gonna, like Dina mentioned, the audit has been finalized. Everything has been submitted to the proper authorities, so we're all in good shape. So we're gonna hit some of the highlights today, not go line by line. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Next slide. So we did audit the financial statements of the authority for as of September 30th. We're going to issue an unmodified opinion, which again is the highest level that we can. And we also audited the schedules contained in the additional information of the urban, non-urban regular services and the schedule of federal expenditures. And again, we'll issue we issued an unmodified in relation to opinion. Yoko will now go over some of the highlights of the numbers.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. In the next few slides, we are going to go over the current year audited financial statement numbers and perform a comparison with the prior year audited numbers. The purpose of this presentation will only be for major account fluctuations. There is a 9.3 million cash increase from prior year to current year. The increase is mainly due to the new account that was created in 2023 to separate the certificate of deposit account registry service, which we refer to as CDARS, portion of the balance that was previously reported in the money market account. In addition, the account balance increase is due to the fact that in 2021, the board adopted strategy to create a capital reserve for future community capital needs. So this is a positive thing. There is about $630,000 increase in investments. TheRide moved excess funds to investments during the year, increasing their capital reserve. Inventory and prepaid, there is an increase about $500,000, $550,000 to be exact. The increase in this grouping is mainly associated with the increase in prepaids. Prepaid balance increased due to the increase in prepaid general insurance account. This is mainly related to a Blue Cross Blue Shield network invoice of about $388,000 for the month of October that was being paid in the current year, along with some premium increases and renewal policies. In the next slide, we are going to cover the net position increase. As Dina mentioned, there is an increase of $10.2 million as the unrestricted net position increased by $10.4 million, which was offset by the decrease in net investment of capital assets of $0.2 million. So the $10.2 million increase in total net position. The next slide, we are going to cover the revenues and expenses. Total operating revenues is comprised of passenger fares and special fares. There is an increase of $1.3 million as a result of services resuming full operation after lower ridership during the pandemic period. So this is a positive thing. We have higher revenues for the year that we audited. There is also an increase of $2.6 million in non-operating revenues. Total operating revenues include federal, state, and local funding. This increase is mostly due to the increase in current state operating assistance of $1 million and prior year settlement of $1.6 million from the state of Michigan. And of course, with higher revenues, we're going to have higher expenses for the year. So total operating expenses also increased $4.5 million, primarily due to the authority getting back to full operations after the pandemic with lower operational cost compared to the prior year. In addition, the increase is associated with the D2, A2, and RTA grants, which the RTA grants stands for the Regional Transit Authority of Southwest Michigan. And the next slide, this particular slide covers expenditures of the federal awards. All the federal grants for the authority come from Department of Transportation. However, Federal Transit Cluster holds the highest amount of expenditures. The other federal grant expenditure activity remained somewhat comparable to the prior year. And this concludes our presentation. In the next slide, we are going to cover the fact that the audit of the financial statements, besides the financial statement audit, we had the single audit, which is the audit of the federal expenditures. We are required to report on internal controls over financial reporting. And also in the next slide, we are required to document or express to you the definition of the material weakness and significant deficiency. So material weakness is the highest level of a deficiency identified by the auditors, and the significant deficiency is somewhat of a lower reportable finding, a lower level of a reportable finding. Our consideration of internal control for the limited purpose described in the first paragraph that we went over documents in here the fact that there could have been material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that were not identified throughout the audit. So we can only report to what we were able to identify. So given these limitations during the audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls as identified as a material weakness, but we did identify one, which relates to as a significant deficiency over financial reporting. And here is a definition of the finding and the condition and the effects and recommendations. So during the audit, it was noted that certain account balances were not reconciled and did not agree to underlying documentation. The client had a chance to provide to us with their corrective action plan response, and we have included that in our presentation as well. And that is also included in the report that was issued. Now, besides the audit of the financial reporting, we also issued an opinion over compliance, and there were no matters identified over the single audit. So there were no matters or findings identified in relation to the compliance over federal awards. So that's a positive thing. And this is our last slide, which documents our contact information in case you guys have any questions for us.
I'd like to open it up to the board. If there are any questions for our auditors, this would be the perfect time. Seeing none, I will thank the auditors for their work. Also to thank Dina Reed and her staff for the excellent job that you've done. It's my understanding that we are just receiving the report. There is no vote to take. So I think that concludes this presentation. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as an official, yes, we have documentation that you acknowledge you received it.
Okay,
That's all.
I didn't see that from last year's board meeting, so I apologize for that. So is there a motion to vote to receive the report as Julie Grand? So moved. And seconded by Chris Allen. All those in favor of receiving the report, raise your hands. And that passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for the faux pas. And we will move on to board management delegation policies 4.0 to 4.4. Basically, this is a review of, it's not a regular monitoring report that we receive from the CEO. This is us doing our due diligence and reviewing policies that pertain to the board and our delegation to the CEO. The report was very unremarkable. Mostly the report shared that everybody was satisfied. We received always and most of the time, there were no noted deficiencies. However, that being said, I'd like to open it up to the board if there would like to entertain any discussion on the report as presented. Is everyone satisfied? I don't see any hands going up. So is it all right to move on then? Sure. One moment. Thank you for your patience. Yes, Kyra.
I'll just say some of these policies, I think I answered most of the time because we can't know about individual board member communication with the CEO or staff all the time. So I think my assumption is that if any individual board member is in violation of any of these policies, it would have to be raised by the CEO and brought to the attention of the chair. I don't know if we've ever clarified that procedure, but I think that's been my only concern when we review these policies is individual board members are not privy to all the conversations that happen in other committees or outside of formal board proceedings.
That's a fair assessment. Yes, Justin.
I think a lot of times when people select most of the time versus always, it seems to be like kind of saying, well, nobody's an idea of like nobody's perfect. And I wondered if maybe we might change the way the question is asked to say, like, is the board member aware of any examples where this has not happened? So like some asking for not like making it a little bit less subjective to say like, unless you have, or maybe having instructions that unless you can think of a concrete example, you should be answering always, but maybe some kind of clarification to remove that ambiguity.
So Jesse's put out a suggestion that we should look at this policy then and look at the wording. Do you want the governance committee to review it for next year? Or
not the wording of the policy itself, but the wording of the question that we ask ourselves.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I actually don't see the question here, but Deb, do you remember the question as it's posed from the survey? Like what question is the board answering when we say always or most of the time?
I think the very first question.
Is that it?
It's actually, I don't know if you're I totally skewed all the results because I think I answered opposite of what was
right.
Because I totally don't know how to interpret the questions.
I see.
So I think the first one it's a little I could read it multiple ways. And it's like, are we valuing ourselves, or is that what we're supposed to do? So I agree, I think there could be some room for a different method of how we ask these questions.
Yeah, it's not the policy that I question. It's more like what should the survey say, rather than saying like, do we do this always, most of the time, some of the time, rarely or never? Saying like, are you aware of any examples, or are you aware of any times where the board has not adhered to this policy? And I'm sure there's a more elegant way to word it, but ask like, be more specific, I guess.
Do many of the board members feel the same way as Jesse, Kyra, and Rich then? And if so, would the board entertain possibly having the governance committee review so that we can be posted up for next year to have that concern eliminated? All right, then we'll go ahead, Mr. Carpenter, and add that to our plan of work for the next governance committee meeting. Or Deb, thank you so much. Are there any other concerns with the report or issues that anyone came across? Yes,
I'll
Justin.
bring up just, I think the one that had the most disagreement had to do with something that we have had a lot of conversation about as a board, of like the discussing reasonableness of interpretations. And I just wanted to call that out to say that that's something that has been identified and something that I think we should work with our new governance consultant to get better or get more direction from that. I think that's been brought up to her already, but I look forward to investigating that.
I think that's a valid concern. Can we loop that into what we just said? The governance committee is actually meeting with Sue Radwan, our new governance consultant, on March 1st, and we can identify these issues with her and have that discussion at that time. Would the board be satisfied with that? Do I see any negatives? Seeing none, that's how we will proceed. Very good. Yes, Deb. I need to talk louder. Everybody needs to talk louder. Everybody needs to talk louder. Use your outside voices tonight, kids. Oh, very good. Thank you, the public, for being patient with us. We're using a whole new system. We've got our owl tonight instead of being mic'd up. So this is a learning experience for us. So we're working the cadence. Task force, and Mr. Richard G.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So I have a bit of a meteor update today, which I'm really excited about. So Kathleen and I met with Sue, our policy governance coach, this past Monday to discuss basically a plan of approach regarding not only like our legal owners, but also our moral owners. And I think it's helpful for me to just kind of take a step back and give a little background, right? So we know what the ownership linkage, which is what the Open Dialogue Task Force has been tasked with. It's really so the board's role in that is three things that we want to assume. One is assure that the board is the informed voice of ownership. Two, that we're listening more than reporting. And three, that we're actually listening for values that people uphold or legal owners hold around what we are working on. And that third bullet point was really a big part of what we had a discussion around. And one thing that the policy governance coach mentioned is that this really works best for us in particular, specific to us when we're working and struggling with a specific issue or trend, in our case around transportation, that we can actually get integrated into ends. And so in parallel to still working at trying to get in front of the legal owners, in particular, City of Ypsilanti, and then next would be the Ypsi Township. The moral owners piece was the brunt of the bulk of our particular discussion. And timing wise, I think it's actually perfect. One, based on what I see in the agenda of what the CEO is going to talk to us about regarding building ridership, that is a big focus that we have as a board, is how do we increase our ridership overall? And with 2025 being focused ends, 2024 is a great time for us to gather info from our owners so that we can actually drive toward that. So the approach that we have, and I'm going to give all the details, is something that I want to first bring to the Open Dialogue Task Force numbers. And actually, Jeff, I would love it if you could actually at least join in these initial meetings. I don't want to add another meeting per se to your thing, but I think you'd be a great help with this. We have an overall approach that we want to present. If the ODTF agrees, yes, this is actually a great approach, we'll then bring it to the board. And then the board can decide yes or no, do we want to go with this path? And then we'll have some steps from there. I'm hoping it's going to be yeses across the board. There's no pressure, but I think it's actually a really good approach for us. A lot of it actually will involve, which is the next part I want to discuss, is we had the phone server report that was sent out, especially right before the millage for us to consider, that Hugh did for us back in 2021. We think there's ways to actually overlay that report with the approach we want to take, that we're going to bring to you to recommend. And then from there, it may actually, so there's actually two outcomes. One is that we'd like to bring Hugh here in front of the board in April to actually review and actually walk through that report with us, because the report can only be so thick. We think that there's a lot of context and additional information that he has. He can share with us that he just didn't have the time to actually put into a report. So a request that I have is that if we can get that report sent out to the board, Deb, and then if we all can actually read that again before, I guess, our March board meeting, so that we can actually maybe come up with some thoughtful questions that we could also pose to Hugh before he comes in, and also maybe we can ask him when he actually gets here presenting in front of us. So once we have that, so the next 2 months are actually going to be a little frenetic for us, not just the ODTF, but also the board, because there's going to be a few requests that I have for you. I'm going and I'm tasking myself to get you for the ODTF to meet within the next week or two to go over this potential plan. And if they approve it, get this in front of the board for the next board meeting in March. And if that all goes through, we can actually tie this all together for our April board meeting with Hugh there and this projected approach. Because after that, if we do approve the steps, we have about 3 to 4 steps after that I would really like to get us moving before like the summer. Because a lot is going to involve getting in front of constituents, the riders, or the communities that we serve. I think that's going to be real helpful if we do it during the summertime. So I sent an email out to some of to the CEO and also to Kathleen. It's an 8-step process. Steps 1 through 5, I want to get accomplished in March. Step 6, which is actually really more focused around the report that we have with Hugh, that's pretty much all of April. And then starting in May is when we're actually going to do step 7 and 8. That's the process. I know it's a little vague because you're not seeing all the details, but I think it's going to be a worthy approach for us that I think will accomplish a lot of the challenges that we have of knowing what the riderships are moral owners are looking for, and how we can actually map that and tie that into the particular events that we're currently have and that we're hoping to have maybe in 2025. So that's a big update that I have on there. And if there's any questions, just let me know.
Let's open up to the board. Are there any questions or comments from what she just presented this evening? Seeing none. Good job, Rich. We're going to be moving forward. Sounds excellent. All right. Next, leading into and segueing into is building riderships, opportunities and challenge, and that is Mr. Matt Carpenter.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. So this is under board education. And so I think we can be a little less formal. I'm not going to stand at the podium unless you need a target to throw things at. I'll still up there, but I'm going to just invite sort of, open it up, Q&A kind of things. Some of this is probably very familiar to many of you or intuitive, and they express it in ways that maybe you have heard or haven't heard before. I'm also going to invite my colleagues on staff to weigh in as appropriate. And I will talk louder, apparently, directly at the owl. Okay, so do we have one second? All right, so I'll start by saying that every year the board decides its own to-do list, your annual plan of work. I've been working with the governance committee to sort of figure out how you want to eat the apple. And one of the first things on your list of things you wanted to learn about under educational topics was ridership. just ridership. So this is really just an introductory. I'm going to skim some very high level sorts of information, and I'm very curious to see where you'd like to take this discussion next. If you're satisfied here, that's wonderful. If you'd like to take further steps, please let us know, through the governance committee, and I'm sure we can arrange additional speakers or something else to drill down as far as you'd like to go. I don't know. Yeah.
Moving on this screen back. It's just a little lag.
Oops. All right, we'll find out. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about context, because in the ends monitoring report a few months ago, I realized, how staff look at ridership is based on sort of a professional context. Board members are looking at it from a different point of view. And there's some information we can exchange there and kind of get a little bit closer together on how we see things. We talk in a very abstract way about how ridership grows at sort of a theory level. Talk a little bit about our approach, the things we have going on. What are we already doing in this space? And then pause and just sort of open it up for discussion. But at this point, I would just say, hey, if you got a question during the presentation, go ahead and stick your hand up, and we can pause. So this presentation was a lot of fun for me to put together because I love graphs, and I got to play with Excel quite a lot here.
Being slow.
Being slow. So the graph, the first graph we'll see eventually is historic ridership. There we go. To just sort of begin to set the stage for where have we come from as an agency. And as you can see here, Mr. Mogensen alluded to some of this in his public comments to begin with. We can see our historic ridership trends. We can see some of the big external events that had an effect on our ridership. This is just total annual trips. And obviously the big event here is the TheRide agreement starting in 2004. For whatever reason it started, however it started, it's undeniable it had a huge impact on our ridership. I'm told this morning, 43% of our riders today are through the TheRide program. It caused back then a 47% increase in ridership within, I think, 5 years, which is, based on historic information, and it's not precedented up to that point. The lesson I would draw to that will become, I think, important as this conversation goes on, the power of targeting a particular group. We run a mass transit system. Mass uses economies of scale. We don't have a transit system for the university and another transit system for the school board and another transit system for downtown commuters and another transit system for whomever. We have one mass transit system, but it needs economies of scale to really perform well. That's where mass transit works. And by bringing in new segments, new groups of people, you're going to hear me use the word segment a lot today, we can begin to see a lot of important effects on growing ridership. We can also see some other things in this graph. As Mike may remember, and some of you were around for, the 5Y TIP was our first millage, I think back in 2013, 2014. That was our first service expansion in many years. Yes, we did see a bump in ridership, but it also plateaued fairly quickly. It was nothing as compared to like what TheRide did. Both of which did bring in new money, I should point out. But the 5Y TIP, we now understand, was swimming upstream against the trend at that time, which was ride hailing, which undermined ridership nationally, something like 12 to 18%. I was reading a report a little while ago during exactly the time we were rolling out new services. So new services can bring in new demand, but the competitors you're facing matter. And you're going to hear me use, again, economic terms while we're in here. And you're going to hear me talk in some terms like competitors, supply, demand, and things of that nature. So some more context here eventually. I think I got to hit the button a minute or two early, is the next slide is a beautiful graphic. Eventually, I gotta click it again.
It's showing up on mine, it's just being slow.
Oh, should I have not clicked it again?
Are we getting a real object right now?
Yes. Can you just move the slide?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Now report, it'll be a second, sorry.
We're learning, you know, this is our first time in this space and
It
we're
is.
working through some bugs. Thank you for your patience. Technical difficulties, please stand by. There we go. Beautiful maps. Thank you, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, SEMCOG, the depository of all transportation related data for the Southeast Michigan region. What you see here is SEMCOG's community profile data for 2023 related to the intensity of transit mode share. How many folks are using transit to commute to work primarily?
It's awfully.
Understanding our glitches, and we're going to continue on with our presentation by Mr. Carpenter.
Okay, great. Thank you for your patience. On this graph, we see information from SEMCOG about transit ridership. The darker the color, the higher the ridership. What you can take from this is that we're at the top of the class in our region. Ypsilanti has the second highest mode share in the entire Southeast Michigan region. So 5 million people, second only to Highland Park. City of Ann Arbor is, I think, fourth. And then not surprisingly, our more rural township members are a little bit lower. What you can take from this, we do very good locally, even in the home of the automobile industry. But this does begin to lay some groundwork in terms of the paradigms that we live in here. That even the number one of Highland Park, in terms of mode share or commute by transit, doesn't break 15%. I want to give you some numbers just to put in context the auto-centric paradigm that we live in here. We have 150 buses in our community if we merge our fleets and U of M's fleet. There are over 173,000 registered vehicles in Washtenaw County. We do about 4 million miles of service annually. SEMCOG tells me there are 4 billion vehicle miles traveled in Washtenaw County on an annual basis, making us 0.1% of the total amount of vehicle activity out there. It's kind of, I haven't found yet trips All is the operative word. I did look up SMART and DDOT. On that national scale, they're mashed down in the bottom corner with that big cluster of blue dots, very low. DDOT is higher than SMART. But if you think about it, Detroit's, I think, 600,000 people now. That's the number in the denominator. SMART covers 4 million. You take the 4-county area. A little bit of Monroe, I think. So their performance is very low. In transit parlance, there is a difference between systems that are sort of systems of last resort, very low levels of service. SMART was like this for many years, where there would be a bus maybe every couple hours. It's the only folks who are attracted to that kind of service are folks without much of an alternative. Okay. Yeah, all right, so let's go on to the next slide. In terms of what does this data dump mean in context, when we were talking about the ends monitoring report, and we were talking about rides per capita and mode share, I was pretty excited about reporting to you 3% mode share. It's either Rich or Susan. God, that seems horrible. Because 3 is really low. It's a small number. And I'm like, oh, I've never told them this. They don't know that actually looks pretty good. A story I heard very early in my career gets back again to the importance of the car paradigm we live in. Washington, D.C., when they started construction of the subway system in around 1960, 1962, 33% mode share, almost all streetcars and buses at that time, obviously. 20 years later in the 80s, when they finished the original push for the subways, rideshare had shot up all the way to 33%. They built an entire subway, and all they managed to do was hold even on the mode share in an office commuter rich environment, because the number of car trips had ballooned so much over that same period that's what it took just to hold the line. So when we talk about stretch goals or aspirational goals, the context we'll need to grapple with is in the context we're in of a car-oriented society. Progress is possible. The long-range plan I'm going to talk about gives us a path to do that. But we also need to manage those expectations. We're not going to go from 3% to 10% in 5 years. I just need to be honest with you. It's just that's not going to happen. Upshots, we already positioned pretty well. Our ridership, as you can see from here, is pretty strong. And that's really thanks to decades of strong work from generations of staff and board members, the support of the community, city council members over many, many years. We all built that over a long time. Opportunities do exist. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. And we're going to look into some of those higher performing communities to find out exactly what they're doing. All right. Maybe I'll stop there, because that was a lot of data. Before we talk about sort of the theory of what drives ridership. Questions? Mitch?
Well, you may actually be getting into this as the potential approach in next steps discussion. Because one of the things I've been wondering about, maybe the data, I don't know if they have data on this areas that have parking rides. Because one of the things that excites me about the long range plan in particular is the fact that there are going to be additional hubs, right? Briarwood and et cetera, which to me, I think makes it a lot easier for folks that commute in. Because pre-pandemic, I think statistics were like 60,000 people in and out of Ann Arbor every day, which to me, like that's 60,000 potential ride clients. Right? And then that solves some parking issues, extra adjusting it downtown. And so I don't know if there's like data that helps us show that actually parking rides are also effective or not. I don't know.
I will talk about that. Short answer is yes, they're very effective, particularly in the auto-oriented area like Michigan. We crunched some numbers. The long-range plan has sort of that second ring of park and ride lots, which is what we're talking to MDOT about right now. We proposed 10,000 stalls across, I think, 5 lots. If we could add 10,000 trips a day times 255 days a year, that's weekdays, not counting game days, let's be clear. That adds about 2.5 million trips a year on top of what we had been doing pre-pandemic, 6 million. You're absolutely right. That's a big jump. That would be a great new market for us to try to tap into. There's some challenges and opportunities, but we'll be happy to talk about it. Anything else on just the context and the data? Let's move along then. I'm sure there'll be others. So why does demand increase or decrease? So I'm going to get a little wonky here. It's really an economic function. When you strip it all down, supply, demand, matter. Transportation is what economists will call a derived demand. The value doesn't come from consuming transportation itself. Transportation is overhead. You're consuming transportation to get whatever it is at the destination you're trying to reach, whether that's the new job or the better education or just groceries. And as overhead, we try to reduce overhead. The overhead for the costs of transportation are time and money. This matters when we're trying to design the services to make them more attractive. That's why speed matters, why more direct travel matters, because eliminate the transfers. So there's lots of intricacies like this that Forrest and Gretchen work on with their team about trying to engineer it to reduce those fundamental factors. We can also talk about the supply of transportation. That's what agencies like ours do. We provide the supply. That's the level and amount and quality of the services that we put out on the road. Is the bus coming every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes or every half hour? That's the level of service. The supply can affect demand. We put more supply out, it can induce more people. That's the criticism with MDOT over US 23 is that they build another lane, it's going to induce more people driving, right? It's the exact same thing. So we control the supply, and we've been doing a lot on that. I'll talk about the long range plan a bit. The demand side of the coin is a different factor. How many people want to travel, and what mode of transportation do they want to use? That really gets into areas of public policy, culture, social choice, a lot of public policy decisions that we've made. We're going to build a freeway system across the entire country, which unlocked an enormous amount of economic value and activity, but we don't charge for it. It's free. So anything that's free is usually overconsumed, economics. So that's why we see rush hour congestion. That's why people paying out of pocket for a bus fare seems kind of annoying, but driving seems like it's free. No, it's not, right? We know that. But the demand is a bit trickier to get at, but we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Next slide. The only thing different here is the historic ridership. You've seen this before, it was in the corporate business plan, but this just again underscores that our chief competitor really is the car, and how we have built and rebuilt and shaped our society for the car. The peak of public transit ridership in this country was World War II, when the population was not even 100 million people. That was the peak, and we've plummeted and then bounced around on the bottom for decades since then. But that sort of puts it in perspective. Okay, the ride's approach. What are we doing? Next slide, please. We are attacking both the supply and the demand side of this equation. Most of our work to date has been on the supply side. We are starting to get more traction with the demand side. Let me walk you through a couple of things I think are really important here. There's definitely a yin-yang thing going on. When you have more demand, it can drive supply. When you create supply, it can drive demand. Another way to think about this, we're borrowing in staff terms from the retail sector. These are customers. Former board member Jack Bernard hated it when I referred to our passengers as customers. He thought that cheapened the obligation, the social contract we had with them, and I took his meeting. I think you had agrees, right? In this case, I'm using it very tactically when I talk to George, when I talk to Forrest. George, I sometimes refer to him as the Chief Customer Retention Officer, and Forrest as the Chief Customer Attraction Officer. If we were a shop at the mall, we would think about how to retain and attract customers. George and I were at a conference this last weekend. We heard from transit agencies that were talking about rebuilding their ridership coming out of the pandemic. Every single one of them said, as part of their, rebirth story, we focused on fundamentals. I want to talk about quality of service, QoS, I sometimes call it. This is the nuts and bolts in service delivery. Is it on time? Is it reliable? Is it clean? Is the driver courteous? Is it safe? These are basic fundamental things that a transit or department must do, a transit agency must do to retain customers. If we don't do that, but spend a lot of effort attracting customers, it's like pouring water into a colander or a bucket with a bunch of holes. They're just going to have a horrible experience, and that'll be the last we see of them. So we have to have that strong base. 95% of this agency's personnel and budget are focused on that one goal, delivering quality service every day. When we counted it, specifically Deb counted it, 1,892 bus trips a day. That's how much we push out. That's not counting B2A2 or TheRide or any of those supplemental things. We carry about 300 TheRide passengers a day. That's, I can't underscore the importance of that. But this is a presentation about building ridership. So I've said that bit. I'm going to work on some of the other points. Service design, this is the other part of supply, has now pivoted to attracting riders, not just keeping them, but also attracting them. That's what the long range plan is about. And we're beginning the execution with things like the YTC, the millage services that are coming on board. We're cutting the travel time in Nipsey and Ann Arbor by 30%. We're reducing the speed, or increasing the speed, reducing the time. Marketing and advertising are both a supply and a demand feature, but now that Jeff's here, we're starting to get some traction on that. His group is going to, I think, pivot and reposition that. Pricing also matters if you're selling a product. We have tinkered with fares a little bit. I'm not inclined to touch that again. For those of you who remember the budget a few years ago, I'm not sure the juice was worth the squeeze. We'll return to that a little bit later. We'll need to, but it's not a priority right now. The demand side of this is where a lot of activity I see us coming forward. Now that we've kind of got the supply bit put to bed, we have, well, it's not put to bed, right? But we have the long range plan. We know what we're doing. We're pivoting into sort of execution of that plan. Now we have, with some new leadership in certain places, an opportunity to start working on the demand. That's what we mean by advocacy, going out and, I don't want to say the word lobbying, but trying to influence outside decisions on those public policies that have for decades been tilted away from mass transit towards automobiles. So we're going to be a lot of work on the outside policies, marketing and PR. I expect to start evolving in the next few years. We're going to talk about market segments and trends in a moment. But down at the bottom, and we were talking about this, I think at dinner, somebody said culture. And you're right, dead up true. Have you ever seen a picture of the Apollo moon landings where they're driving around on the moon in a buggy? We took a car to the moon. We love our cars. For those of you who've traveled the world, you'll notice that not every culture is quite as attached to their cars as Americans tend to be. It's very true. And it influences a lot of economic decisions, like how do you charge for roads? Do you charge for parking at all? But really, when we get past all that stuff, there is a culture, there is a mindset, there is an attitude that favors personal flexibility and freedom of movement. It's the American dream, freedom. And the car does a very good job of that until everyone's trying to do that at the same time on the same road, and then you got a bit of a problem. But we also know that GM and many other companies really leaned into that with their advertising over decades. So there's definitely it's a shaped preference, and we can unshape it or reshape it. Let's move on. Okay. Our blueprint for the supply is the long range plan. This gets back to, Rich's comment about park and ride. That is a big part. You'll see the regional second range park and ride lot there, because we know that market segment could really boost ridership. 2.5 million trips if we were able to fully execute that. But that's only 10,000 parking stalls. I think the number I hear about people coming into Ann Arbor is actually more like 80,000. So there could be more upside to that. But most of our focus really is within the existing urban area. When I first got here in 2015, we had just come off a big county-wide attempt. You may remember the transit county-wide efforts of 2012 and 13. And a wise person told me when I first walked into town, he said, the ride's probably got two strategic directions you can do. You can try to grow your footprint, or you can try to intensify your services within your existing urban area. But you probably can't do both. And you certainly can't do them at the same time. That was true. Good advice. The long-range plan is about intensifying services in the area that's growing population. Maybe not as fast as we'd like in some cases, but it is growing, and we have parking limits that are coming in. We have TOD coming into this area. There's a lot of potential in here. In all of these cases, we keep coming back to frequency. The frequency of the service. If it comes once an hour, that, I'm going to be honest, that's not very good service. That's safety net service. Once every half hour, okay, that's better. Not great. Once a bus comes more frequently than every 10 minutes, people psychologically stop relying on timetables, printed timetables. You know that you can just sort of walk out to the stop or station, and it's going to be there. And if you just missed it, you don't have long to wait. That's a psychological rule of thumb in our industry. Why is frequency so important in North America? It's important everywhere, but especially here. Anyone want to guess why frequency matters so much for us?
Cars?
Yeah,
Because you can do it in your car.
bingo. It mirrors the freedom that your personal car can give you. You just up and go whenever you want. That's why frequency matters as much as it does. There's a lot of other stuff in the long range plan, in our plan for the supply, but that's my key number to you. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So there's a lot of great stuff that's in the long range plan about growing ridership. There's technology stuff, there's new services stuff, there's things like the commuter bus. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. And we will, as I'll show you in a minute, we got plans to do all of it. But there is a critical path buried in the long range plan that is the single most important path of the entire plan, and I want to highlight it to you. Our goal is to grow ridership. And we know that expanding frequency, and things like bus rapid transit are an expansion of frequency, is what does that. Then we need a bigger fleet, working backwards. Because if our fleet is fully deployed right now in rush hour, we need more buses and more frequent service out there. But our garage is full, and our terminals are too small, and our operating budget can only carry so many drivers. So we need to expand these things at the right time, in the right proportion, so that we're in a position to expand the fleet, so that we'll be able to increase frequency and grow that ridership. You've heard me talk about the garage, I know, many times, because that to me is the hardest nut to crack there. We've got the terminals, they're moving, right? We've got the YTC going, we've got stuff for the Blake. We are doing some work on the garage, as Gretchen knows. That's the next big thing to come out of the capital planning type. But it's also probably one of the most expensive things we're going to work on. And it is, without a doubt, the least sexy project you got going on, because it's a garage. It's not a terminal. Passengers will never go in it, but we can't operate without it. So this is the critical path. I don't mean to dismiss the fare collection technology, the information systems, cool stuff we might do with ride hailing tie-ups, like all that is in the long range plan. But to me, this is the critical path and this is the main event. And when we talk about alignment, you'll see our capital plans are geared towards these sorts of things.
So when we're talking about a new garage, are we talking about maintaining the existing garage we have and then adding a new garage on top of that, not eliminating the one we have and building an entire new one to take care of the entire fleet?
We did a preliminary study for 2018. It concluded we cannot cost effectively expand the building we have today. It's just on all sides. But the location is great. It's just, you can't get closer to downtown. And if we need, I think that one's a minimum of like 3 acres. We need at least 20. We're not going to get that in the city of Ann Arbor. But there's lots of places around here, actually, that would be perfect. So the recommendation you will receive from me and staff probably in the future, knock on wood, is that we have a satellite garage, probably in the Ypsilanti area where most of our workforce lives, coincidentally. But we keep the old one. It's very common for transit agencies to have multiple garages. I'm pretty sure New York loses a garage our size every day. You know, like they have 30,000 employees. Just wrap your head around that. I've lived in towns that are that big. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, this is not something you guys have ever seen before because we created it specifically for this discussion. We do have ridership estimates, forecasts, projections from the long range plan. They were not really prominent in there, but Boris and I did some background work to show you what this would look like year by year related to the projects in the long range plan. We see the historic stuff here in the background. We saw that before. And this is the projection of where it will go if we're able to execute the long range plan. Where are the forecasts coming from? Our best professional judgment. There are no computer models that can really deal with agencies of our size. Frankly, we're too small. But based on judgment, comparables we see in other communities, and being able to tie up with, you know, for example, the good work going on in Ann Arbor with the transit supported zoning. This is, we believe this is possible. This is a viable approach. And you can see how big things like opening our main BRT in 2031 can lead to, you know, pretty significant increases in ridership in the years that follow. So this gives you an idea of the goal we're shooting. And at the end of that is that doubling-ish of ridership that you saw in the scatter plot before. Okay. I want to switch gears here and talk about another tool that we've only kind of used. Mr. Mogensen alluded to it in his public comments. That's the concept of market segmentation. I'm pushing Forrest and Gretchen and Jeff. We need to drill down more and more in this space because this is how we identify groups that we can bring into the mass transit system. Right? We're not building separate bus systems. It's a single mass transit system. Market segmentation in the retail sector is about taking your total population of potential customers and just learning about them. How old are they? Their gender. Do they like blue razors or green razors? You know, you focus group, you test, you find out about their consumer habits, and you learn how to either target perhaps your advertising to a particular group or your product development turns a little bit, say, okay, if we tweak it just a bit, it'll sell better to this particular group of people. So I'll give you an example. In our industry, the most crass and old-fashioned way of dividing a total population is into, and I agree with Mr. Mogensen, I don't like these terms. This is how we talk about it. The captive market, folks who are transit dependent, we sometimes call it that. These are folks who are perhaps have a lower income, are not able to drive. This includes young people who just don't have a license yet and are stuck at home. This includes older folks who maybe can't drive any longer. It also includes a much larger segment of the population, sometimes called, I prefer discretionary risers, but are sometimes also called choice riders. I hate that term. You will not hear me use that very often. It's kind of old fashioned. They prefer discretionary. The distinction is they have a car available. They have a choice as to how they might travel. We will need to drill down into both of these broad segments and get further down to kind of begin to micro target our services and our opportunities, our advertising, to see what more ridership we can get from them. So let me give you a couple of examples. TheRide has produced great ridership for us. I don't know if we're carrying half the people we could carry, 100% of the people we could carry, 2% of the trips we could carry. We don't know. We don't have data on that. We know that they're 43% of our riders, 43. But what would it take to get, if they're traveling twice a day, about 2.5 times a day on average, that cumulatively would have a huge effect. If we're carrying 50% of the eligible people, what could we do to get the other 50% or even just 10% more? And what would it take? So really learning that segment, breaking them out from the whole and drilling down onto them is an example of how we can use this tactic and approach. Another example dovetails with some equity opportunities that we have. High school students. I mentioned Champaign-Urbana carries all of the high school students for 2 school boards, actually. We carry some of Ann Arbor public schools and none of Ypsilanti community schools. And for Ann Arbor, mostly what we sell them is a special student pass. The school board only wants to buy 1 trip in and 1 trip out because that's all they're legally required to do. But we could sell them at the same price, a regular full-time bus pass that they administer to the students, which takes the heat off us if it's really nice. And then market to that group of young folks, hey, you can get to your friend's house. You can get to your after-school special. You can get to work. They would be traveling outside of normal rush hours where we have spare capacity on the road. The buses are not full in the weekends, the evenings. The marginal cost to us of carrying more people in those periods is 0 because the seats are there. The retail sector will use the phrase loss leader sometimes when they, like Costco's hot dogs. We all love hot dogs. And their chickens, I understand too. They sell it at a loss just to bring people in to buy the $500 worth of oven cleaners or whatever else you can buy at Costco. So borrowing from the retail sector has a lot of potential for us. Drilling down into these segments has a lot of potential for us. If I were a board member, I might wonder, is the CEO going to try to grow ridership at the expense of the captive market? Are staff going to ignore the needs of low-income folks or persons with disabilities or seniors while chasing the larger group of discretionary riders? And it is a larger group when you look at the numbers and it's in the thing. You'll just see the number of households with at least 1 car is 80% or more. So it's just a much larger pool of customers. Transit has always had a social mission, and we are never going to get away from that mission. So I want to just hit that one head on. Not only do you have ends that obligate me to not forget those folks, I'm actually happy in our mass transit model here that if we increase frequency, for example, to attract, if we're intentionally trying to attract that discretionary rider who has a card and has a choice, everyone benefits from that. We're not increasing prices to make it exclusionary, right? So everyone still has the same access and benefit to it. So this is a moment where this really will, I think, this approach can help everyone, bringing them all together. Okay, next slide.
Can we go back to
Yeah.
So you just saved me a month's of work.
Oh, yeah.
Because to back up to what we're talking about the ODTF stuff, this is the proposal that we wanted to bring to the committee was around market segmentation. Trying to figure out who do we actually want to focus on, in particular those that are riders. So just so you're all over the board, that's.
Well, this is staff's approach to growing ridership. This is not the same thing as what do community leaders or elected officials think is important. Those are not the same thing. We just sort of need to keep that in mind. So I would say they're probably similar and there's some overlap, but I suspect your work and our work, they'll dovetail, but I don't think they'll replace each other.
I'm just excited that you are talking about this because I think you said it will dovetail. So.
Yeah, when you said something about, something about IPSI schools or students and, can you just explain that a bit more,
Sure.
how it differs from service provided in Ann Arbor? I assume that doesn't mean no students aren't riding in IPSI, but more about the services provided
Yeah.
by the school.
It has to do with our institutional behind the scenes relationships to the school board. So the services aren't really different per se. This goes back many decades that the RIDE has had a relationship with Ann Arbor Public Schools because that's our home. It's where we grew naturally. The stuff there is more evolved than further away. We have a relationship with Ann Arbor Public Schools, and my understanding of it is they are legally obligated to provide transportation for students who live more than a mile away from their school. Closer than a mile, they assume they can walk. The state passes money through to the schools to pay for this or something. Within the city of Ann Arbor, we sell the school board these special student passes. They then give those passes to most students within the city proper as their transportation voucher, if you will. And they reserve their yellow buses, mostly for high school students, for the peripheral areas outside of the area. I'm not entirely sure I understand that correctly. And I think there's probably stuff I don't completely understand, but stay with me for the broad thrust. We're selling them this special pass that's mostly one trip in and one trip out. Speaking with Julie, I do think there's differences in there because some students are traveling multiple times a day. So I think I need to learn a little bit more about that arrangement.
I don't think they're checking with kids, do you live 1.5 miles or more? I mean, my son at community just shows up, right? He just went down to the office and got a bus pass. And I think that's how most
Their
high
enforcement
schoolers,
is-
yeah.
I'm not,
I
I'm
think
not,
they just
I,
have a certain number and they get more if they need it. And
so that's as loose as it may be.
but I don't know that he would even have been aware if it was one trip. I don't think he's using it more than 2 trips a day max anyway, right? So I don't know that he would know the difference. It's just the pass they gave him at school.
So there's a little, we need to tighten up in here in our understanding, but this is the broad thrust. This is my understanding.
But in Ipsy, I don't think they can go to the office and get a bus pass.
We have no relationship with the Ypsilanti Community Schools in any way. This is not, it's not intentional. It's just sort of historical ramifications of being based in Ann Arbor and not Ypsilanti. We only formally brought Ypsilanti into this agency as a board member a decade ago. But we're 55 years old, so just put it in perspective. This creates a couple things. An opportunity, first, as I described with Ann Arbor Public, if we replace that student pass with a free-for-all pass and then marketed the heck out of it. High school students in particular are a market. They are captive riders. Okay, lots of them have a car, I get that. But a lot of them don't. They're transit dependent in that respect. We can unlock a lot of opportunities for those kids. A lot of jobs, can be filled by those folks. A lot of after school programs could be gone through. There's a whole lot of things that could be done at zero or very little additional cost to us, particularly if they ride in the off-peak periods and we have spare capacity out there. However, and Jesse and I have discussed this, and I discussed it this afternoon, to do that for Ann Arbor and not do it for Ypsilanti seems wrong. Once upon a time when Ypsilanti was a POSA community, it was pay as you go. I think maybe at that point we didn't do anything, but they're not that status anymore. They are part of this agency. So I think anything we do in this space, we have to do for Ypsilanti. That may force us to accelerate some elements of the long range plan. Ipsy Community High School is on, is it Packard and Hewitt? It's not necessarily in the perfect location for using transit to bus to it. But if we put a north-south route on Hewitt, which I think is in the long-range plan, actually, we could, with one transfer, serve most of the community in a reasonable period of time. So that's a kind of kill two birds with one stone approach to say we're really going after the untapped market potential of teenagers as potential riders. Once we get that bus pass in their hot little hands, maybe they'll ride more frequently. But it also allows us to expand equity within our service area and do right by everybody. So I think you get 2 for 1 of that. So it's an example. Expanding MRIDE or drilling deeper into the largest group of people we've got. I can't believe we've tapped that out. It plateaued, but I can't believe we got everybody. So there's more space there to get, if you will. And as we dig into the market segmentation, we'll find other pockets. What about seniors? What about those out-of-town tourists? What about if we can get that commuter park and ride going? What about shamelessly hosting tailgate parties? Game day. What about, why not? You know, so thinking a little more like sales people, advertising executives, leveraging what we've got, putting as many people in the buses we're already running anyway. And that just drives the ridership up. Now, there is a point of diminishing returns, and not every ridership group is going to have the same sort of cost benefit profile. Some will be extremely expensive to pursue, and we may say, not right now. Others, like the equity benefit of the school thing, we may want to tackle that early simply because it's 2 for 1 kind of thing, and the right thing to do. But that's that when we think about it that way, when we apply that sort of for-profit retail oriented thinking to our product and service, and we're just trying to sell it. These are the sorts of things we need to start thinking about.
And I think it would be helpful to drill down into those numbers at MRIDE, because as someone who started a new job at the university not that long ago, and I don't know what others' experiences are, but I don't feel like it's being pushed very hard
You
there.
get relentless calls using your MRI cards.
And it's kind of a way to like stick it to the U, honestly, because, you know, I used to, when I was advising and I had students, I'd say, you know, because every time you're swiping that card, one, like your student fees are paying for that, right? Or other fees are paying for, but you're not only, you know, this is one of the few ways that the university sort of pays into the system, but you're also supporting transit in your community every time you do that. And so I think there's a value that can be tapped into there, as well as maybe more cynically, like a way to, you know, for I think there's also a group of people who feel like the university doesn't pay what it should be paying. And this is an example of them actually paying into the system that could be tempted.
So there's a 2 for there. Although I won't recommend it that way. But
No, I'm not.
So that's the power of thinking about market groups and segments and breaking them down. Now, I want to be clear, this does feel a little dehumanized. To take a population, start counting them and focus group testing them and this sorts of things. But this is how the entire capitalist system has gotten as big as it is, and I see no reason to deprive ourselves of this tool. You have my commitment as we use this, that we're not abandoning our social mission. Many of the groups that we have traditionally served, we're not treating people like commodities. But it is a very powerful tool to help us figure out how to grow ridership. I want to move along just for the sake of time. Okay, advocacy and outside policies under construction. This is a big one on the demand side, and I'm really happy that there's so much going on in Ann Arbor. Even without a whole lot of overt direct action from us, we see the T1 zoning coming from the city of Ann Arbor, which is so wonderful. It's a big deal. There is a lot of work that we have an opportunity to do here. Now, Jeff and I are working to begin assembling our first legislative agenda. We intend to bring it to you in June. And this is really going to be focused on what sort of outside policy changes does this agency want to endorse and pursue to advance our mission. There are a variety of things that I know are going to be in here. Land development and parking policies, chief among them. Highways, US 23, just a great example. We also have an opportunity for bus on shoulder operations. It's not entirely a stop. There are things that are in there that if we can get MDOT to open, relax a little and try some new things, maybe it's possible to go there. Bus lanes. I think there's huge opportunities in some of our most congested areas, particularly downtown Ann Arbor campus. I also don't think the university is opposed to this. I don't think the city is opposed to this. I think it's just a question of, do we have a plan? Can we present it? Can we advocate for it? Who's paying for it? Do we have the political will to bear the objections that will come from taking a lane away from cars? Because they will. But I think it's entirely possible, and it's worked in many other communities. And of course, funding is a big one. Several of you are accompanying me to DC or Lansing later this year. Jeff and Dina and I should say, will primarily go and talk about them. But also, there's other things in there. The gas tax, the federal gas tax, which has paid for most of our highways for decades, is slowly dying because of Tesla and electric vehicles. We don't pay gas tax, but use the roads. Eventually, a crisis will occur, and the politicians will have no choice but to make a decision. They'll have to replace it with something. The state will have to replace its gas tax with something, an odometer tax, the vehicle miles traveled tax that charges road users what they actually cost to use the roads. Like a utility bill, we started a little bit with EVs. With New York is dabbling in congestion charging in Manhattan, although I hear it's gotten hung up in the courts. The technology exists. We could do this today. It's the political will and our cultural mindset. Politicians are not ready to go there. So coming up with our advocacy agenda, all of us being on the same page and then going out and pushing for it. Some of those things will happen pretty quick. Some of them will take decades. But if we keep working on it, I think it'll make a big difference. The demand side of it will make a huge difference over time. And advertising will also evolve. Jeff and his team are starting to talk about this and making them go look at other systems and go to conferences and things like that. And when you look at how Gillette sells razor blades, it's very emotional feel. How do we duplicate that? This button is hilarious because and thank you for bringing it to me because let me read it to you. Suffering from air pollution, oil addiction, gas emissions. That sounds like a Pepto-Bismol. That is clearly targeted at a market segment that cares about the environment. Road congestion, that's a much more segment of drivers and people who don't like sitting in traffic. Parking frustration, the cure is on its way. These are very traditional ways of selling public transit. The only one missing here is, are you looking for something that's cheaper to operate than a car? That's the other traditional one that's missing from here, but pass that back. But those are market segment focused appeals to different groups of people to try to sell the product. Okay, I swear we're getting close to done here. All right, alignments. This is important. We have so many exciting things we want to do. I want to do them all at once. I know that we can't. If you were to look in the corporate business plan, we have a list in there, 35 different tactics. At your table, we have this beautiful Gantt chart. This is out of date. We're going to have to update it. But this is just the long range plan major project. This is not all the projects. This is just the big ones, and it doesn't break out the subcomponents of all of those plans. This doesn't even include all the stuff that George is doing with his team on the quality of service side of stuff. At any given moment in the ride, I would guesstimate there are at least 80 change initiatives presently ongoing. Everything from testing snow tires to what are we doing with the payroll system, to how do we, like George brought in a deep cleaning of the buses. I don't know if Jesse's noticed, but we're like deep cleaning the buses. Fundamentals. So there are so many things going on. I'm very excited about delegating and empowering staff so that they come up with even more ideas on their own. But when you start to get that many wheels spinning, alignment becomes really important. Not getting out over your skis or biting off more than you can chew becomes a real concern, because we could just end up trying to go in every direction simultaneously, and it doesn't help. So we do a lot of work to sort of focus and align everything we're doing. We look for natural sequences. You got to build the garage first before we can expand the fleet and build BRT. So one, then the others. Natural is then. We got to focus on some of these long-term projects. That requires a sort of discipline and patience. I don't relish coming to you guys and telling you that the garage is a 10-year project. But that's normal in the industry. You go through all the environmental clearances and you get the land and you finally get the competitive grant to do it. And then you start construction. Construction alone can be 5 years. So this is not a short-term game that we're in. We're in an infrastructure game. And we have to have the patience and self-discipline to keep our eyes on the prize. Only Jim Harbaugh did it for the first year. It took 8, but he got there, right? And we may not be able to accommodate every perspective. You will see in next month's presentation, we're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about new ideas. I'm going to tell you some ideas are wonderful. We love them. Let's incorporate them into the plan. Other ideas, not so great. Hit the cutting room floor. Sometimes as a CEO, the joke is you delegate and relegate. And yeah, we do look at some things and say it's an interesting idea, but it's not good enough, or it takes too much resources. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. We're going to talk about how we make those sorts of decisions next month in more detail. But the end goal is to sort of align everything to not trip over ourselves, so that we can make the best forward progress possible. Next slide, please. Almost at the end, I do want to reiterate that, this big alignment process produces things like the long-range plan, the corporate business plan, the annual budget, and I have heard some criticisms that they lack flexibility, or an individual lacks the ability to, really tinker with them. I accept that, but I would say that it's not a bug, it's a feature. They're set up intentionally, driven from your policies to increase ridership. If the board wants to change the trajectory of any of this, you have the policies, you have the tool. You say jump, we will say how high. But this is the trajectory you've put us on. We're just trying to organize things as best we can. But when we hear new ideas, and we do like to hear them, we have to run them through the same criteria, and we vet all the other ones against. There's some good stuff in the back of the corporate business plan about, is it aligned? What's the sequence? Whose role is this? We have been asked to build curb and gutter work for cities. It's clearly not our mandate. It's not our money. I think it would be illegal for us to do it, but I've been pressured to do it. So there are certain things I have to say no to. Other ideas are great, like automated fare collection or high-tech fare collection. Very exciting. I wish we could do it. The RTA kind of has dibs on that. They're supposed to coordinate that at a regional scale across multiple agencies. Talking to them recently, I kind of said, I'm not sure my board has an infinite amount of patience on this point. We've been waiting for you to win an election for quite some time now. What happens if we just can't get to the polls again? Like, are we just going to sit here on our duff forever? And I think they recognize the challenge there. And I think we're going to have some latitude going forward. So there are just some complications to some of these things that need to be sort of factored in terms of how we do it. But we do like new ideas for ridership, and we are willing to listen. Closing, last slide. I'm going to promise anything. Lots of good things going on. Our ridership we're doing okay. Actually, I'd say we're punching above our weight, pretty high in our weight class, in terms of our rides per capita and our mode share. We're not in a crisis. We have opportunities to do better. But I also suspect a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked, and that what we have to do going forward to build ridership will be worth it, but it will not be easy, fast, or necessarily cheap. Things like BRT are not easy, fast, or cheap. But to really get more ridership, that supply stuff is what we got to do. We also got to tackle the demand side, the public policies. We got to help the cities build more density near transit lines. We got to talk to Ipsy and Ipsy Township to see if we can get them to join that kind of movement. Again, not necessarily easy, fast, or cheap. We're open to new ideas, whether they are supply or demand. It is sort of a moving opportunity, but we do also try to keep focused on things like those critical path. I can't allow staff to get distracted by a new shiny widget if it means losing focus on the garage that ultimately determines whether or not we're going to be able to increase frequency. So we have to maintain that discipline. And I will be coming back in March for a discussion about innovation. That's something you ask me to do every year. We'll talk about some of the new things that we're doing in the ride, the things we're testing, the things we're watching, and a little bit about how we choose what stays and what goes. So, Madam Chair, thank you for listening as long as you have. I really appreciate that. I'd love to know what questions you have. And if not tonight, at some point in the future, would you like to learn more about ridership in this space? What more have you picked up from here that you think you'd like to know more about as an education topic?
Thank you, Matt. That was an excellent presentation. So we're going to open it up to the board for any questions or comments at this time. I know it was a lot to digest. I have to say, Deb, I cannot see Mike. So if you see Mike, please let me know. Is Mike asking to speak?
No, he's not. We just need to close it.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the rest of the board?
I look forward to hearing about the new ideas and innovation next month. I think, we're thinking.
Very good. All right. Oh, Sydney, go ahead.
Quick. That was great. Excited to move forward. One question or sort of topic I think I'm interested in learning more about is park and rides outside our service area, like the precedent where other transit agencies have done that, sort of what that means for our operations.
Yeah, I was thinking that, I was thinking during the presentation of more the 80,000 people, but that's the number that I hear too, coming into Ann Arbor. Is there a way to increase ridership that way? Not only increase ridership, but reduce emissions drastically. If you're pulling 40 cars or however many cars per bus off the road, tying that to a marketing campaign of, that's 30 to 40 minutes of extra work that you're getting done to not driving.
I would love to bring you more information about it. I'll give you a couple of thoughts, and I don't know, George and Philly, if you guys have much to do on the rail side. Park and rides they became prominent starting in the 60s and 70s as historic legacy transit agencies were looking at for a way to try to keep car owners riding, and they've grown ever since. Our park and ride lots are hard won. I want to be very clear. Staff and board members in previous year have worked really hard to get the ones we have, but they are, by industry standards, quite modest in size. 200 stalls, it's okay. They're shoehorned in at 23 and Miller within the MDOT right of way. They're actually tenuous. We don't own the land. They could kick us out at any time. Pioneer, we're just renting the space. Larger cities have much more aggressive park and ride schemes. Their success is largely determined on, is parking limited or controlled at the destination downstream? What do we have downstream? We have a hospital. We have the campus. I don't think they would be opposed to reducing their costs for new parking structures if we could find a collaborative way that scratches their itches as well as ours. They already charge for parking. They already charge their staff for parking in some cases. They control it quite strictly with different colored permits. There's stuff there to build on. I know from U of Illinois and Madison that those universities already went that way. And I've seen much larger park and ride lots, like. There's nothing to say a city of our size couldn't have really large ones. George, from the Philly experience and the rail side, did you guys use park and rides a lot?
Yeah, one of the things that we were committed to was greatly expanding our parking lots so that we could market to our riders to park in our parking lots and then come into the city. And how it saved our customers money was that we only charged $1 to park. Huge parking lots. Coming into Philadelphia, you could be charged $20 or $40 to park. But we allowed you to park in our parking lots, and then you would ride our services into the city. Super successful. Our parking, you could call them parking lots, but they were really parking rides. And they were super successful because it just drew so many professionals into Philadelphia.
Gresham, and your consulting business, did you ever get to work with park and ride schemes?
A little bit, yes, and I think too, one of the things is thinking about, there's a lot of different modes that people even, trying to get to the park and rides. It doesn't necessarily need to be parked there. There's, kiss and ride where you can drop them off. There's a lot of work being done with on demand or Ubers, ride shares. So that was a really interesting scheme to try to think about.
You already have bike lockers and bike racks at the park and rides we have today. Scaling it up in the vision that's in the long range plan. We heard the 80,000 number. We sort of eyeballed 10,000 parking stalls. It's actually the footprint of Briarwood Mall inside the circular lane, like including the building. We have about 7,000 parking stalls at Briarwood. And then the building, roughly another 3,000. We don't have that kind of land space around the Ann Arbor freeway ring available. And if we did, how expensive would it be? So you start pushing it further out the freeway, up the spokes of the freeway line. And you just look at each interchange. You see if there's land available. Several of them have great spots. We've already sort of eyeballed some really good locations. Can it be done? Absolutely. If we had the university's partnership on it, I have no doubt it would be successful because they control the demand side of that equation. They can basically tell certain markets, like workers, we're not going to give you a parking spot anymore. But we are going to make sure you have access to a free one. It's out here. There's a bus every half. And if you have to get home in an emergency, we'll get you there. So it's a well-established, very mature tactic for tapping a particular market. I'm sure we can dig up more information on it. We've made it up.
Good question. Any other questions or comments on the presentation? Jesse?
So we saw ridership increases with the Go Past and then a much larger one with the M-Ride. Doesn't that kind of indicate that like going fare free would also boost ridership, since that's what basically kind of what those programs became for employees. Not that those rides were free. I'm not talking about revenue, but that the two biggest increases in ridership that we saw were based on the cost reduction to riders.
It's suggestive, but not conclusive. So if when M-Ride was brought in 2004, the university also shut down several large parking lots. I don't know that they did or not, but that would have had probably even more of an impact at forcing people onto the bus, frankly, than the free fare that they were suddenly paying. You're going to see in the innovation presentation that the free fare concept is something we are watching closely. I know it's something board members have asked about. I have seen some tentative information out of Boston that is suggesting they are seeing some ridership increases on a few limited routes where they've tried this. It's really unclear the degree of ridership increase you can expect, because it's really closely linked to how big is the population for whom the price is a deterrent. If $1.50 is really so expensive that it's keeping large numbers of people from riding, and going fare free might be a big deal. if you're a more affluent community and that price is not a deterrent, $1.50 doesn't matter. And that, you know, a more affluent, like suburban community or something. It probably wouldn't move the needle at all to eliminate fares, just because they're not price sensitive. Again, back to the market segments, kind of understanding who your target audience is. So we would have to do more research to know, have a better idea of what impact it would make here in Ann Arbor, because we got so many market groups that we're dealing with.
That might be interesting to see how your market segmentation project might, or research might impact that, whether maybe there are targeted ways to, because you also were talking about like students, and students already are riding at a discounted fare. So, you know, if there were, I'd be interested to see, you know, if there's a targeted fare free at students, might save the whole, like asking for an ID thing that the drivers have to deal with. So yeah, I think maybe there's going to be some interplay between the segmentation research. And just one thing I wanted to say, since you had talked about road usage charges, MDOT is currently running a survey on road usage charges. I filled out, and I can send out the link to people if they're interested.
Please do. I have a feeling that's them floating a trial balloon to see if the public sentiment has changed at all since the last time they asked how people would feel about paying per mile. Last time I think they asked, they were thrown out of the room. It's not a popular thing, particularly if you look at how big Michigan is, how many people actually have an alternative to driving. In the city of Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti proper, you do okay. 2 miles outside, you're kind of hostage to that sort of thing. So that's going to be a big societal shift when it comes.
One thing that was noticeably absent, they did not mention like weight-based vehicle registration charges. So I suggested that to them.
I think that's a good suggestion. Why not?
So riffing off of what was just said about free fares and looking into that component in the innovation discussion, I'm also wondering if part of that could also be, we currently have half fare deal, the fair deal, and I'm wondering if we could look at that, if that is a program that could be looked at. So in other words, expanding the fair deal to include or raise the ceiling, and or when you have like a multiple family dwelling that has multiple, you know, maybe they're on Medicaid and they live in public housing, and when you start layering all of those things in, and let's say you have 4 people that need to ride the bus, even half fare can be quite egregious. So I'm wondering if there might be any opportunity at that level to look at that fare structure and see how we might be able to, if we can't necessarily get to a fare-free model, that may be a way to help those who are beholden to the system and need our system.
I think this agency could choose to do something like that, either for revenue generate or ridership generation, or just for pure equity, social mission side of things, both of which are legitimate choices to make. The challenge with the fare thing is that it hits us in the revenue. And the economic model for public transit in the United States has always included a user pay component. Remember, we came from the streetcar industry, that for-profit model to begin with, kind of, sort of. There's stories there I can tell you, but that's ancient history. If we go down that road, we'll have to simply take the lost revenue into account as the cost of that project. And I said this with free fares. If we were to study that seriously, we would just have to either eat the lost revenue, which I'll tell you right now we can't. Like, it punches a multi-million-dollar hole in the budget, which is not something we can like shift funds around to hide. It would be a permanent, ongoing operating hole. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's a cost, but it's the absence of revenue, if that makes sense. But it's permanent and it's there for every year. We would have to have a permanent revenue source to counterbalance that. which the only way I know to do that would be a tax, because again, the paradigm we're in Michigan, we are restricted to property taxes. We have no other source of revenue. There are other complications that we would have to take into consideration. Right now, the university does pay us a lot of money based on the cash fare. If we eliminate cash fare, the university is probably gonna be like, great, we're not paying, right? In which case the Ann Arbor taxpayers, Ypsilanti taxpayers who are paying to fund us might object. So we have to look at sort of all the different threads that are connected to these decisions. But there's no reason we can't have the discussion. And I think many of them could result in increase in ridership and improvement on social mission issues. All of them are legitimate questions.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, thank you very much. It was an
Thank you.
intriguing and helpful presentation. We're going to bring Ms. Dana Reed back for the quarterly fiscal year quarterly 1 financial report. Welcome.
Thank you. So you have the first quarter financial report in your board packet. I do want to share that this was presented to the Finance Committee earlier this month, and we had a pretty detailed discussion, as we usually do, about the financials. I guess I'll start out with just kind of hitting a few highlights for you tonight. Mostly, the first quarter is usually not something that we can project trends from. It's usually just our first snapshot at how things are going for the fiscal year. So the good news is things look to be on budget for the first quarter, and revenues look to be coming in strong. I would like to highlight just a couple of things on the income statement. And that is under revenues. We have a few revenues that are a little bit over budget, which is a good thing. And usually, like I said, we wouldn't call it a trend when it's only the first quarter. But there are a couple areas where I do think we're going to continue to see strength compared to budget throughout the year. And I just want to point that out. Local property taxes appear to be coming in favorable compared to what we budgeted for this year. And we do expect that trend to continue throughout the year. We don't know exactly we don't know exactly what the numbers will be with the new millage coming into effect in 2024. So I'm a little bit reluctant to say we're going to see this exact trend through the end of the year, but I do think we're going to end up over, and that's really just a result of the base budget that we used. We did not know how fiscal year 23 was going to end when we were budgeting, and fiscal year 23 came in stronger than what we had expected. So even though we did budget a 5% increase in property tax revenues year over year, the base that we were using was a little bit soft. So the good news is we're looking to be probably over budget a little bit on local property taxes, and we'll keep you up to speed on how that goes through the year. We also have a little bit of an upside on fares and contracts, and there was an increase to the U of M contract, the TheRide contract. So for fiscal 24, that didn't get incorporated into the budget. So we're likely, even though there's a true up at the end of the year, we'll see how that fares out by the end of the year. But I do expect that throughout the quarters, as we continue to see these financial reports, we'll be seeing a little bit of an increase over budget. I wanted to point that out as well. And then the other good news story is under other revenues. You'll see that we're over quite significantly, and that's a result of interest rate benefit on our CDARS and investment accounts. So typically we would reinvest our funds in agency bonds or CDs, but right now we're getting a more favorable interest rate in our CDARS program, which shows up here on the upside for interest. And of course, we never know exactly how that's going to go. So we usually budget that fairly conservatively, but that is actually interest already earned. So we expect that that's going to hold through the rest of the year, and we'll watch interest rates as we go. Just a note on that, all that money is 100% federally insured. So there's no risk there. It's just more advantageous to us right now to keep it in that account earning higher interest than what we would get in some of the other longer term investment accounts. On the expense side, most of the savings that we're seeing there is related to the difference between straight lining the budget and some of the hiring that we're expecting to do for the expansion of services. So the savings that we're seeing, for instance, on salaries, wages, and benefits, I expect to dissipate over the year. At this point, I expect still everything to be on budget, but I don't expect that necessarily we'd be saving a lot of money by the end of the year. So just to note there. But ending the quarter in a bit of a surplus. Again, we're using pandemic relief funds through the third quarter. So we'll continue to see that. And then as we get into the fourth quarter, we'll see how that fares out for the end of the year. But right now, we're not projecting a surplus at the end of the year. And we'll reach those revenues expenses as we go. And then I would just like to jump forward to the balance sheet, which is the next page of the financial report, and just point out that assets are stable, cash is stable, and you can see, as I mentioned earlier in the evening, our capital reserves are just a little bit over 33 million, which is in line with the strategy that we've been implementing now for a couple of years, and in line with what was budgeted for the end of fiscal year 23 and into fiscal 24. We're also meeting our operating reserve targets. As you can see on the graph to the right of the balance sheet numbers there, we're at 2.9 and our target is 2.5. So all things are favorable there. No big changes in cash or investments. Everything is just quite stable through the end of the first quarter. That concludes the highlights of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board members may have.
Do you have any questions or comments for Gina? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next, we're going to move back to Mr. Carpenter to Matt, the ZEP update.
Great, and I promise to be much more concise this time. So definitely has been some effort towards the ZEB work in the last month. When you did give us an approval last month to proceed with the grant application, Mike thoughtfully added an amendment to it for a monthly update. And so I'm happy to be here to provide you some monthly update. About a week or so after the last board meeting, the notice of funding opportunity did come out from the FTA. So it's a very bureaucratic document. The important things in there gives us the rules for applying for the grant and a deadline, April 25th. That was the number we were most interested in seeing because it simply tells us how much time we have to get our act together and submit the paperwork. So that was a bit of a relief because I was a little concerned about getting jammed up, you may recall. So we have, still months, okay? So that's great. We have plenty of time to continue working on it. Our team is assembled. Dina is leading it. We have partners engaged. CalStart, a nonprofit that focuses on helping agencies buy zero emissions buses. One of the two leading such groups in the country is on board. Thank yous to Troy Lundquist, who managed to line that up months ago because their spots are all taken now that the grant's open. Everyone's rushing the doors and we were already ready, so that's nice. They have helped identify 20, Dina tells me about 20 tasks that we need to complete to fill in the grant application. Dina has identified, I think, another 10. I keep throwing new things on the pile. So we've got roughly 30-ish things that we need to do in the next 60 days, ranging from very small sort of check the box sorts of things to more important sort of strategic discussions. But what this does mean gives us a little more clarity of our timelines. You may recall that I need one more approval from you, the formal transition plan. That's that formal, very particular document that the feds need to see. We're targeting bringing that to you in your April board meeting, which I think is the week before the due date. So please, 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 I need a quorum in April. Just putting that out there. Because I do have something you need to vote on and we'll only have a week after that. So we do think we'll need that much time to sort of put everything together in there. One big element of the proposal has to do with the number of buses, and we discussed this last month, particularly the hybrids. And we'd sort of tentatively said, I think 35, but we had also suggested to you we needed to triangulate that number. We needed to find a good sweet spot. We think we're getting closer to that. The number is, we are pulling in our horns a little bit on the total number, bringing it down to 20. For now, it's still floating. I want to explain the logic to that so you're not surprised. It's about $20 million. That ask is on top of the 10-ish for the hydrogen. That's putting us in a above average ask for what other agencies have managed to get. So when we look at the winners, and we can look back at the records of who's been awarded what, we can see that, like, I want to say it's the average or the per bus cost, like Dina knows more, but basically this is pushing it, our luck, just a little bit. We're aggressive, but not absurdly aggressive. I don't think we'd be laughed out of the room, but we do, you may recall, I sort of said, we don't want to leave money on the table, but we don't want to come across too heavy-handed and kind of get shot down. So we want to leave them room to come back and say, let's negotiate for a lower amount. And they said, you ask for 20, we'll give you 15. I'm going to say yes, like it's free money. And I can't make them give me anything else. So that's where we're looking. We're above average. It's comparable to what we're seeing other winners ask for and get. It's affordable in the capital reserve because we do have other projects, particularly the Ypsilanti Transit Center, that will need local match out of the capital reserve. And we want to make sure we don't promise the same dollar to two different projects because that would be awkward. We are dealing with a lot of rising costs in the industry. This is something, perhaps George can weigh in on in a moment as well. And it is definitely affecting the bus market. We are seeing cost escalations and delayed deliveries in this space quite a lot. Talk about that in a bit more. So being a little conservative in that respect. It's also a very dynamic funding environment. This is not the only grant we're going to be pursuing to help pay for these things. We have agreed to work with the city of Detroit. They're going after a completely other pot of money for hydrogen buses, trying to arrange a joint procurement or a joint grant with us, city of Detroit and Flint MTA. So if we might, we lose one, we might win the other. We're hedging our bets. There's also the potential for earmarks. We don't call them earmarks anymore, but federal earmarks are still a thing. And so we're going to be looking at that. Back to the rising costs, some of the things that are starting to come into the grants, a lot of it's sort of your normal competitive grant. But I think I mentioned to you before, if we're going to win, we can't get an A, we have to get an A+, because the winners are all doing all of the extra credit. And to be competitive, you have to not just ace the test, you got to do the extra credit too. We're starting to see extra credit show up, reflecting challenges in the bus manufacturing industry. And I want to take a minute just to tell you kind of what those are. I think everyone knows Nova Bus has backed out of the North American market. Proterra, the Tesla of the battery electric market, has gone bankrupt. Eldorado typically manufactures most of those smaller low floor shuttle buses you see at the airport or at theme parks. They are selling off their transit bus business. The culprit is inflation. George and I at the conference got an earful from the manufacturers and the FTA about this. Steel inflation at 70-something%. So just the cost pressure they're under is enormous. And they have, the way the FTA forces us to write our contracts doesn't give us the latitude to increase our payments to them under their traditional approach. You may recall that with Nova, in our contract, pre-pandemic contract, we had a ceiling for inflationary impacts of 4%. When their costs went up 11%, the most we could do was 4%. And there are enough of us in some sort of problem like that they said it was better to just cut bait and retreat to Quebec. So that we are seeing, I think, what was it? 20 years ago, there were like 18 bus manufacturers.
Yeah, that was true.
Now there's 2. So this is a macroeconomic problem across the entire industry. We are seeing the FTA create new rules, somewhat on the fly, to try to respond to this. I think we'll be able to adapt to some of them more easily. One of them is freeing up the contract language to allow, it's going to sound silly, for 500,000 bus, traditionally, you pay on delivery. The company has to front all the financial risk of buying all the material, all the subcomponents, assembling it. They don't get paid until they've delivered the bus and we've signed off on it. FTA is loosening up, allowing progress payments and even advance payments. And they're changing the terms of the grant to basically say, that's an extra credit. And effectively what they're telling us is, if you don't get the extra, if you don't try for the extra credit, you're not going to win the grant. They're not saying it that bluntly, but that's the effect. So we're going to have to do that. I think we will be able to do it because of the flexibility we have. We've heard for some other agencies, they just can't because of a state law or some silly thing. Another one that's going to be a little more complicated, they want us to reduce bus customization. This is more problematic because no bus is bought off the lot. They're all made to measure custom affairs. I was surprised to hear from New Flyer that they have to stock 95 different kinds of glass because bus manufacturers across the, or companies across the country, we just have peculiar needs. And yeah, I can see 95 is a little excessive. But there's different gradings of shading in the glass. Is the window open at the top? Does it slide? Is it completely sealed? Okay, I get it. But they're making that an extra credit. So we're going to have to tie up with some other transit agencies and reduce the details of our specification in order to win the money. That may mean that when push comes to shove, we may not get these buses exactly built the way we would prefer. So I don't know, for example, if those cushy seats are going to still be in. I don't know if the mechanics are going to get things laid out exactly the way they prefer. But other agencies don't either. This is not being presented to us as an option. This is, if you want the money, this is how you're going to do it. So we're going to have to lean into that sort of space if we want to go after this.
Is the number of seats?
Oh, that should be fine. But the pressure on the manufacturers is how, you know, like there are dozens of different models of seats. There are catalogs. I know that may blow your mind, but there are catalogs. Same thing for the glass. There are 2 or 3 different kinds of steering wheels, driver's seats. I think there's 2 or 3 major manufacturers. You add it all together, just a cumulative like it. I think I can understand why the manufacturers are screaming. I do think there's a bigger question about have we created barriers to entry to the United States market with the Buy America compliance requirements? Yes, absolutely. That was intentional. It's a jobs labor sort of thing. It's been in federal law for decades. We also do not allow foreign manufacturers in very easily. So we can't tap Europeans, we can't tap Asian manufacturers with much ease. So we're limited to 2 manufacturers, and I think they each got like 1 or 2 plants. There's only so much throughput that they can manage. We are seeing the delivery timelines extend out longer than I've ever seen. So those are just some of the evolving things. George heard a lot of, I stepped out of the room, but George heard a lot about the rising costs in capital construction. You want to say just a few words?
Yeah, the cost of capital, no matter what, whether you're building a bus or building a bridge, the cost of the increase has been like 19% over the span of just 2 years. So it's really putting pressure on all types of projects. What you allocate the money for may not pay for what you envision at the end result, just because of the inflation of every year being put upon the cost of the project. So we did get to hear some presentations from both bus companies regarding please limit your ask.
try to keep it as streamlined as possible so we can help you to get your buses in on time to piggyback projects. But I never saw such, I think, a dire feeling from the bus companies. Like, we want to be successful. We want to give you what you need, but you got to help us along the way. We need the federal government to be able to give us capital. And we also are asking you to please take it easy on us for your unique type of needs. So
The advanced payment ideas are a way of basically transferring risk from them onto us. And, not entirely inappropriate, it may be reasonable under the circumstances. So wrap it all up in a bow. We've got a deadline, we've got a team, we've got a 30-item to-do list. We've got good partners. We're starting to work our way through it. We think we're solving some of the major issues, like how many hybrid buses. That's kind of a fundamental thing. But as that continues to roll through, we have a deadline for you guys about the transition plan, or probably the last thing at the April board meeting we need approved. And then we'll start submitting the sucker the next day, see if we can get it in under the wire. And so far, so good. We're about where I would want us to be at this point in the grant preparation. Happy to answer any questions.
Jesse.
The transition plan, I'm a bit surprised that you're waiting until like so late in the process to put that before the board, because you've described it as a relatively simple document, but also one that's needed. Why is that getting put off?
I think in part, and Dina can jump in if she'd like. We want to make sure we only ask you to do it once. We don't want something we discover in late March to have an effect on it. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what that would be, but major decisions like how many hybrids are we buying? If you remember that pretty graph about the evolution of our fleet, decision like that will change how that graph looks. That's, I think, the most important part of the transition plan. They want to see a commitment from us. When are you getting to zero emissions? What are your plans for your fleet? We just want to make sure that when we bring it to you, it's ready, and that everything that might come up in the course of the grant has been taken into account. Dina, if you want to add to it, please.
Yeah, I will add something. Another aspect of this is everything that Matt was talking about the new priorities that are not required to win the grant, but preferred. There's a lot of work that needs to go into this, and just with staff resources, what we're focused on right now is trying to find partners that we might be able to partner with on the procurements. We're trying to finalize our list of vendors. There's a lot of activities that need to be done kind of earlier in the process. The transition plan is a fairly straightforward document, and to your point, probably won't take a big heavy lift to put together. But I think there are other things that really need to take a priority because we don't want to be waiting several weeks or a couple weeks before we're starting to identify who our partners will be that are going into the grant application. Because once we identify who those partners are, in other words, like who we're going to buy buses from, what other agencies we might partner with, we need letters of commitment. There's a lot of effort that goes into making sure that we can support that in our process. So just in terms of risk of things that maybe will take a little more time and take a little more coordination with other agencies, that's what we're focused on right now. It's possible that we could have it done prior to that, but in order to manage expectations, that, to have it ready for the board meeting, it'd have to be done here in the next couple of weeks. And like I said, we're really focused on trying to open up that partner pool, because those are critical items for us being successful in the grant.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. And you're not off the hook yet. It's the CEO report.
Oh, only another hour to go. The report is in your packet. I think the one thing I would note is there's been, even since the release of this packet, a lot going on with MDOT and US 23. A lot of discussions. Jeff and I were at city council last night, 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, very well received. One of the counselors was wearing a Trains Not Lanes t-shirt. I didn't catch that. I caught it later. They seemed generally happy with us coming out of our corner a little bit. I think our press release has been pretty effective at its intended concept, which was putting a very specific example of what could happen on 23 on the table. That's not a capacity expansion project. We did, put the ride's credibility out there a little bit in order to do that, but I thought it was a very successful tactical decision. I was at the Watts meeting yesterday morning, and heard I do have a meeting with the region head of MDOT next Tuesday. So that's been put on the books. I heard from one of their staff at Watts yesterday that tentatively, I think they are going to take us up on our offer, but knock on wood, I haven't heard that from the right person yet. So I'm cautiously optimistic. And there was a lot of support around the table. I do think there is a division locally. Ann Arbor City Council has already passed a resolution against any capacity expansion of the highway. No widening of the lanes. It doesn't look like everybody like in the county is ready to do that. But the idea of asking MDOT to include a transit scenario in their study, pretty popular. I haven't bumped into anyone who says, well, that seems unreasonable. No one's saying that. So I do think, I think it'll happen, but let's wait and see what I hear from MDOT next week. It was effective. The press release was effective and certainly got a lot of attention. So there's other stuff in the packet. I'm happy to answer any questions about.
So I just have 3 quick things. One is the adopt stop. I found that to be super interesting. I don't know what it involves, if you buy the stop or
No. Okay, so the Adopt a Stop program we've had for many years. Basically, if you have a bus stop, the adjacent landowners, sometimes we approach them, sometimes they approach us, but we have a formal agreement by which they agree to keep it clean, to empty the trash can, to maybe remove the snow. Like if it's a residential street, they might shovel out the lead walk for us. If it's got a trash can, we'll bring them garbage bags, but they empty it and maybe pick up the litter. Some other things around, and I think there's more to it than that, but it's just a voluntary agreement. Usually it's the adjacent property owner, or if it's an apartment complex, they'll adopt that stop. But that's the basic idea.
Got it. Thanks. Second one is the employee engagement, the National Transit Employee Appreciation Day. As a board member, and I don't know if as a board, I don't know if there's stuff that we can do to help with that particular event.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, a dumping tank or something. And then third, I'll volunteer for that.
Oh,
and it's recorded. It's on tape. The third one, though, is actually, this is something more for the board. There's a question. It's around the staffing update. So I have concern around if they're having issues, turnover, and making sure they have enough staff in place, especially in fleets. The LRP plan, which really goes into effect, I think, officially September timeframe. It's really not that far away, and so I didn't know if we, as a board, want to maybe request to at least get a little more detailed. Even if it's just a brief, just like here's where we are staffing, here's how we short each board meeting moving forward until we get to September, because I get concerned that we're going to hit September. We have these great plans, this LRP thing, we just can't support plans with having jobs. So it's just a question for the board, if that's something we'll request or not.
Now, I remember, I think George, was it last month or the month before, you gave some sort of presentation with regards to how many drivers you need to hire and things like that. But I do see the value in what you're asking. I know that I myself had those same dreads. Like, can we get there? Is the rest of the board in agreement that that would be something we'd like to hear? Just a short little, like, where are you at kind of thing, or I really want to hear your thoughts.
Feels whimsy to me.
It feels meansy.
I mean, if Matt wants to provide that to us, I'm happy to have that information, but unless they're bringing this as a problem to the board that we need to provide input on, I consider that his side of the house.
I'm wondering if there's a way to wrap it up in the, I know that you give a report on the fixed routes and all of that sort of thing. Is that something that is considered in that report? I'm trying to remember everything that's in that report right now.
Service report.
It's a service report, but it's also,
I think,
go ahead.
I think this is just sort of a nuanced, detailed question about the rollout of the long-range plan and the millage services, which are already in the CEO report. So, as to whether or not you want to sort of formally ask more detailed stuff, I'm sure George would be happy to tell you right now where we stand. If you, and we're happy to tell you every month until we're executing. I don't believe this was intended as a signal of a problem. Or just sort of a management FYI sort of thing. So I don't mean to startle you. That was not the intent. But we're happy to just sort of tell you where we are right now.
I think we've really done a great job, and this is a shout out to our HR team, Monica Booth. Right now, we're sitting at 203 operators. We need 206 for the April rollout. We'll need an additional 20 operators to meet the full expansion. We did have a little bit of a curve thrown in. We have one retirement happening tomorrow from a person that's been with us for over 30 years. That will bring us down to 202 operators. But on a very positive note, we have a current class of 13 operators that we're seeing a lot bigger response now, people that want to be operators. I don't know why yet, but that's a very positive development. So that if everybody graduates and everything goes as we plan, we'll have 215 after this class, with the anticipation of immediately starting another class so that we'll be ready. I'm very confident now that we're going to meet that number. So, we've been doing a lot of good work.
And how about mechanics? Because I think that's what's written in here.
Yeah, the mechanics, we're doing fine. We're not having a challenge getting the mechanics in the door right now. So that's really not a big concern. Not to say that it can't be a concern, but it's not right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were there any other questions or comments for the CEO? Seeing none, we'll move on to, are there any emergent items just in case? Seeing none, we'll move on to closing items or action item recap. It's Beth and Judd.
Okay, I feel like I probably didn't capture everything, so everyone please jump in and help me here. With regards to the open dialogue task force, there's a lot coming in. Rich is circulating some material, but we are looking forward to having Hugh debrief us on the telephone survey in April. I think that is where we're headed from that. Kathleen, you had asked for something to be added to the governance committee agenda towards the beginning of this meeting. I missed what that was.
Oh my goodness, can somebody help me out? It's been a long day.
The question,
Discussion on
4.0, yes. Thank you so much.
That one. And from the ridership discussion, I heard an interest in learning more about park and rides as sort of an initial question. Was there anything else from that? What I would suggest is that we'll come back to governance committee and sort of figure out, what more do you want out of that particular education topic, or just park and ride, and then we check the box for now, and it can always come back up. So I'm suggesting that goes to governance committee while we prepare park and ride information.
Well, to be fair, I mean, that came from me, it's at a board request.
The park and ride
Yeah, I
question?
guess it was kind of.
Yeah, please.
Well, it was all, oh, okay, all right, so.
And I think that those three of you kind of chimed in that you were interested.
I think it's worthwhile at least having an initial discussion. It may come out that we discuss it and it's something that's tabled for the future, but at least to keep it on the radar, I think it's an important thing to think about. I know other cities like Detroit have park and rides like in Dearborn and other areas that they can get into, so it would be something to possibly assist with ridership.
That was the only explicit request for something specific, additional information from that, but if the door is open, if you think of something tonight or tomorrow, oh, I want to dig in more on that, I would suggest reaching out to Kathleen and just letting her know what that subject might be, or me. I'm happy to collate that information and get back to the governance. To that. I don't think I had any other action.
That's it. Okay, and then so the topics for our next meeting, we'll hear communication and support to the board 2.9, financial conditions 2.5, and cash investments 2.6. So that'll be on our radar that we'll be getting an email soon saying there's a survey to be done. Innovation presentation, which sounds very exciting based on tonight's presentation. I'm very happy for that. We'll have our quarterly one service report and another ZEB update. We will be returning to our regularly scheduled programming and we'll be meeting on Thursday, March 21st back at the AADL. Also, maybe if we could, at the next governance committee, add having a discussion about how tonight went and looking at the future in terms of partnering, with having meetings outside of the city of Ann Arbor. That might be a conversation we should continue. If the board would be happy with that, or are there any objections? None, okay. So that wraps that part up. So then we're back to public comment. Deb, is there anybody online?
Yes, there is. Ms. Hawkins, you are unmuted. You are unmuted, Ms. Hawkins.
Good evening, everyone. I do apologize. I think that was an accidental touch, but I will just add that that was accidental, but I do want to say good evening to everyone, and I'm glad to hear some of the things that I'm hearing tonight, but otherwise I don't have any public comment, so thank you.
Thank you. Deb, is there anyone else?
Jim Mogensen, and you are unmuted.
So, so several things have come up. The first is something that I had come up with a while back, and this is relating to fairs. And it relates to association versus application, is how I described it. So if you look at the Go Pass, if you lived in the downtown Ann Arbor area, the public DDA helped subsidize you get downtown. If you were associated with the university, the federal government would subsidize your ridership. If you were low income, you had to apply. And you had to go through this great application, and you had to have all your business, and you had all the stuff. And then if you were lucky, you got a half fare. So I just want to bring up that had come up. The other thing to keep in mind, just in the back, is if you raise the cash fares, this happened the last time. I know it hasn't happened in a very long time, but last time it happened, what happened was the paratransit fares are based on that fare that can only be double that fare. And so when you increase it, it doubles it. And it did impact how many rides people were able to go on paratransit. I know people who had to change how they used the transit system based on that increase. So it all depends on some of the budgets. Another thing is relating to this idea of structural change. So I used to live in the Greenbrier, which is across the street from the Green Road Park and Ride. And we had great bus service. And then the Plymouth Road Park and Ride went in and the service was changed. And so the on the Plymouth Road, that was the buses that got you downtown. And if you parked at the Green Road Park and Ride, that got you over to North Campus. And so I had two options. I either had to go out to the Plymouth Road Park and Ride, in which, and I did this once and then was told by my family never to do it again. I had to cross the southbound entrance ramp on US 23 to get out there. I had with my walker. The other option is to take the Green Road Park and Ride, go to the VA hospital and transfer. And that's how I got downtown. So these kinds of things, when you do that market segmentation, can greatly impact that. And I would say also people who are, you know, quote unquote transit dependent / captive, that they have to put up with these changes, but also well, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time and attention. As always, it's late.
Deb, is there anyone else on? Oh, that was it. All right, then we'll close public comment and we are now looking for adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion? Rich will make motion to adjourn and seconded by Jesse. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Very good. That passed unanimously, everybody. What a great meeting. Thank you so much for your participation.
Good night.